Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org.
Hello, this is Brian Mercer with Author Magazine. Today I'm speaking with Lisa Medhus, Jamie Butler, and Eric Medhus, who are together responsible for the material in Dr. Medhus' new book, My Son in the Afterlife. Welcome to Author Magazine.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
All right, I'm doing well. Jamie, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, Brian.
Thank you for joining me. I should start off by saying that Eric has actually crossed over on the other side, and we'll be speaking to him through Jamie, who is a spirit communicator. So let's get started. There's a lot I would like to cover. Elisa, please tell me about Eric.
Eric was, or is, I suppose, such a sensitive, sweet, compassionate young man. He did have some troubles in that he had learning disabilities. In fact, he was bullied for that a lot. One math teacher called him stupid to his face. He also had Tourette's, the motor type, not the verbal type. And he was bullied quite a bit for that, as well as he had an odd nature about him. But I'll tell you a story that really typifies the kind of guy he was. I remember, must have been around 2 years before his death, his older sister Michelle fell in love with this 30-year-old skater dude. He's the kind that lives with his parents in the basement, smokes pot all day, plays Nintendo, and of course we were just thrilled that they had this new relationship. And we were even more thrilled when they decided to get married 2 weeks later. Man. And fortunately, they broke up. So she was, of course, devastated. She was sitting in Eric's truck. They were talking about it. She was crying. Eric was listening, hugging her, and all of a sudden he burst out into sobs. So, Eric is the kind of guy that when somebody hurts, he feels that pain too. Of course, we were sobbing tears of joy at that point. That's another story.
Right. Well, it sounded like from reading the book that Eric was a very sensitive young man and had a very big heart. Could you talk a little bit about his passing? And so he was 19 or 20 when he passed?
Yes, he had just turned 20, and he was so disappointed probably that he didn't reach that drinking age. But apparently he tied one on the other side on his birthday, so that's okay. But yes, he took his life with a gun to his head. And, oh, God, Brian, I'm telling you, that was so devastating. It's like an atom bomb went off in our family. So that was rough. And on top of that, we found a body. That was even more rough.
Yeah, one of the things when I was reading your book, it had to be a tough part to write, especially the first part, as you're kind of reliving that process. And when I was reading it, I literally could feel your grief coming off the page. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to have to write, to go through that, and how that helped you with the grieving process.
Well, the initial writing was actually purgative. I seem to grieve better on paper than just talking about it. And really, it's hard to talk about it in a family that's grieving because everybody else has a hard time with it. So it's very hard to purge with them. It was difficult, but I think the most difficult part, Brian, was with the editors, because they wanted me to check this and check that and reread this, and I couldn't do it. I told them I can't. I trust you guys with your own editing because I cannot relive that.
Right. Exactly. It's like you can put it down on paper, but you don't want to have to reread it and relive it.
Exactly.
As a writer, I was to say, as a writer, I know that a lot of times we lift stuff. If we're either writing memoir or we're writing fiction, but we're lifting stuff from our own biography, and just having to, I know when I'm really in the zone and writing, I'm actually back there reliving it, and so it had to be tough. But when you were writing that part, you were writing it specifically for this book, or was it for the blog? Describe exactly kind of where you were.
I really didn't know there was a book in my future at all, not until quite late. What I did was grieve for the blog members. I wanted to create this blog because I felt like people who grieved like me needed to have some safe and loving community so they could share their pain too and feel supported. So at first all I did was share my grief with the blog members, and they could share theirs.
You're a doctor of medicine, correct?
Right. I'm an internist, been practicing for 30 years. I have 5 children, 1 grandchild, and I really define myself first as a mother and probably last as a physician. I don't really identify myself as a physician. That's a calling, but it's not what defines me.
You described yourself at the very beginning of this process as a skeptic and someone who didn't really believe in anything that they couldn't see or touch or couldn't be measured. Through this process, you were opened up more to the afterlife. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yes, first I was a skeptic because, as you said, as a physician, my whole world was science because that was a large part of my education. For me, something didn't exist unless it was perceived by the senses or at least measured by an instrument that could deliver it to the senses. Plus, my 2 parents are both atheists, so that certainly didn't help at all. So when Eric died, I just didn't know how to answer those 2 questions that were so important to me at that point, and that's, is Eric still somewhere? Does he exist? And if he does, where is he?
When you started the book, you're talking about how you were such a skeptic, and then when we get to the material where you're speaking with Eric and he's talking about what the afterlife is like and what you were asking him the big questions, which I found fascinating. You seem to be very open to it. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how you went from point A to being a skeptic to then being open to this material and to Eric.
Brian, it took a long time, actually. The first thing that catapulted me on that path from skeptic to believer was an experience that happened 3 days after Eric's death. I get this call from my father. Remember, he's an atheist. I mean, he's a hardcore atheist. His first words to me after Eric died was, "I'm sorry, Elisa, but Eric's going to turn to dust." He's that kind of guy. He said that he was sitting in his chair, reading a book or something. Then he looks up and there's Eric standing in front of him. And then he said Eric turned into his little boy self and sat in his lap. And he said something like, "Things come in threes." We never figured that one out. But my father was so startled. He said, "Elisa, I don't know what to believe. I'm so startled." This guy does not startle. He's this strong thoracic surgeon that's done trauma surgery, etc. I've never seen him startled a day in my life. And so that started me on my path. And then at the same time, all my family members and a lot of my friends were coming forward describing all these pranks and visits and other forms of communication from Eric. And I thought, what's wrong with these guys? Are they deluded? But then I thought, no, they're pretty rock-solid, sane folk. So that got me to thinking, too, and that's why I started my research. I read so many books on quantum physics, alternate dimensions, near-death experiences, you name it. I read it. And then I also read something about, I read some controlled studies on mediums, which intrigued me. And I heard, after I exhausted all the possible reading I could do, I heard that a lot of parents will seek the help of a spirit translator in order to try to get in touch with their child. So I thought, I'm going to try that too. Again, I didn't know what else to do. I ran out of reading material. And so I did try a number of them. Some of them were just awful, but a couple of them were very good. Jamie Butler, who's with us today, for example, oh gosh, she pegged Eric's personality to a T. His irreverent sense of humor, his mischievousness, his boyish charm, his sailor talk. Poor Jamie. And she was able to validate a lot of things that there's no way she could have known. Like the fact that he was sitting in a chair in his room at his desk at the moment of death, what he died from, the kind of gun he used, clothes he was wearing, and so on. I was impressed. So I continued to have sessions with her, asking all those personal questions at first, like why? And did we do anything wrong? Could I have done something to save you? But then after I was satisfied with all those personal questions, I went on to the more general questions about death, the afterlife, and more. Like, what does death feel like? Does it hurt? Where do you go? What happens to atheists? And so on.
So at this point in the process, how how open are you to the material you're getting? Are you still a skeptic? Have you turned into a believer, or where are you in the spectrum?
I'm 100% sure now.
Well, now, but I mean during this point, as you're getting the information. It
took me, at that point, when I first started, I was still a skeptic. I needed still continued validation. And it took me, I'm going to say 3.5 years, before I truly, truly believed. I went from 0 to 90% sure, but I got stuck at that 90%. And this is during most of the writing in the blog.
So you've been getting this material, but there's still part of you that's not quite ready to buy it fully.
Exactly. I hovered at 90%, and I'll tell you why. It's because, first of all, I didn't know how to get from 90% to 100% sure, but also I was really scared because what if I did put all my faith in it, 100%, and then I woke up some morning and found out it was all a big fat lie? I mean, then what? That's like losing Eric again, but
right.
This time permanently, and I just couldn't go through that. Again, this is like not the wishful thinking of a grieving mother. I did not want to believe.
So what was it that made it go from this 90% to 100%?
Well, that happened quite recently. I think my blog members would be horrified to find out how recent that was. I got a call from a blog member who said that she heard 3 voices on a recorded session between Jamie and I and Eric. And I thought, no, that can't be. There was nobody in the room. We didn't hear any voices during the live session, but of course I listened to it. And yep, 3 voices. One of them was definitely Eric's. I mean, a mother knows the sound of her own child's voice, and I had no doubt that that was him. He had this way, for example, of saying breakfast like a little child. He'd say breakfast. And he had this verbal tick that he did all the time. It sounded like he was clearing his throat, like that. I even heard him pacing. That kid could pace around my kitchen island constantly. I'm surprised there's not a groove in the tile, but I heard that as well. And I was intrigued enough to get a sound professional to analyze it, and he agreed. These are not human voices. There were little distortions, especially in Eric's voice, that were not typical of human voices. And there was one voice that sounded like they were whispering right up into the mic, just a centimeter away, but you don't see anybody. And I think the most interesting finding was the fact that these voices left no voice signature at all, no voice print. And the sound professional said that doesn't happen in humans, not at all. So there I am, 100%, never going back.
So you have evidence to your satisfaction that something's valid about this experience.
Absolutely.
You mentioned in the book that a lot of your family members were getting visits from Eric and friends, but then everyone was getting some kind of visit or prank, except for you. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I have to give you a little information that Eric relayed to me. First of all, you have to know that everything is energy. He describes us as sentient energy that's self-aware. Now, even this computer that I had in my lap is energy. Your energy. Jamie, your energy. Even thoughts, emotions, information, love is a form of energy. In fact, Einstein tried to define love with a mathematical equation, but he died right in the middle of it, unfortunately. And he says that matter is frozen light. That's what Einstein said. So, and I think that's why we cannot see spirits. And I'll get to why I was the last to, I promise I'll get to that, why I was the last one to get a visit. All this matter and spirits vibrate at their own very unique part of this long electromagnetic spectrum. Now, we're in that tiny sliver called the visible range. Spirits and radio waves and X-rays and ultraviolet rays, they vibrate at a frequency that's outside of that visible range. So that's why we can't see spirits. And yet we know that we can't see radio waves, yet we know they exist, so that's kind of funny. But anyway, people who grieve and are very, very depressed, they go all the way down. Their energy vibrates at a point way down at the bottom of the visible range. And that's why when we're depressed, when we're grieving profoundly like I did, you feel denser, you feel heavier. And that's why we use terms like I'm depressed, I feel low, I feel down. And so imagine the spirit up higher outside of the visible range having to work so hard to lower their vibrational frequency to get to us. And that's why he had a hard time getting to us. Some spirits are better at doing that than others.
So it sounds like you were so much in your grief, you had your vibrational rate, if you will, was so low that it was hard for Eric to bridge that gap. Whereas when you were started to come out of it and able to get a little bit happier, you were raising it, and then he could bridge it. Is that safe to say?
Exactly. I remember one of the first visits I got from him. It's really an interesting story. It's a funny story. I went to bed one evening, turned off the light, and I swear I could not even get the covers over me before there was Eric jumping from the left foot of the bed to the right, to the left, to the right. He was hopping like a little rabbit. And on the left foot of the bed, there was my sister Denise, who had died, I don't know, I think 2001. She was looking at him and grinning. I know she was thinking, like, you're such a kid, you're acting like a fool. And I was grinning too, and following him with my eyes, back and forth, and it was just all so surreal. And then all of a sudden, Eric turns his face toward me and says, and looked startled, absolutely shocked. He says, "Mom, you can see me." So he flung himself in my arms and we hugged. I'm telling you, Brian, he felt absolutely solid. He felt like he was when he was in a body. It was just amazing. And yet, still, I was still in that 0 to 90% range. So, as these amazing events happen, you still, after time passes, start to second guess yourself. At least that's what I did in my case.
So was it like actually seeing a physical person moving around and feeling a physical person that real?
Well, he looked a little see-through when he was hopping on the bed. But when he hugged me, I really wasn't looking at him. I just felt him. He felt absolutely solid.
Well, I would think that having experienced such pain, you would still want to hang on to that a little bit of doubt because, like you said, it's so devastating to have to potentially lose them again. Jamie, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the mechanics of what's happening here when you're talking with Eric. In the book, there's dialogue cues for you and then Eric and then you again, and then there are places where it says Jamie laughs or Eric laughs. And there's one place I remember it said both Jamie and Eric laugh, and I'm trying. Well, how does that work? How do you make the distinction between when you're talking and when Eric's talking? Can you tell that on the recording or?
Oh, absolutely. Well, all you're hearing is my voice. And as long as the translator is very clear, like when I speak to Elisa, I have to remind myself to say, Eric is saying. And then once she knows that I'm going to be translating his voice, I can move into the first person and say, I love you, Mom, all of this. And she dictates it down onto the paper, and it reads so wonderfully in the book. It's so entertaining. And this is the first time I've ever been able to go back and read what I've translated for someone else and see my voice in it. And it's hard not to get engaged with Eric. He is so embracive. He's funny. He's so witty. He often just makes my mouth drop open. He talks of concepts and things with metaphors that I would never pair together. And you end up learning so much from him. The mechanics are really simple. You just think about two people who speak different languages, and then there's one in the middle. And the one in the middle knows both of them. And so I sit in the middle. I'm the medium, not the small, not the large.
Right.
But and you hear one thing and you grab hold of it and you move it through. The hardest thing with being in the middle is that you can't interject what you would like to hear. You can't interject how you think the material should be done. And that's been one of the most difficult lessons in my life, is to pull myself out of the game and really just stay an empty straw and let whatever needs to come through, come through. I think Elisa might vouch, and a few other people, I'm not that heavy of a sailor talker, a cusser, a grab life by the, as Eric would say, the balls. And some of the things he says, I just pause and go, I can't say that. And he's like, come on, Jamie. And I'm like, oh, please don't make me say that. And so I end up saying it, and we move forward with it. But
well, the book reads very well. It feels like there are three of you in the room, and then I start to figure out, okay, wait a minute, how could that be possible? So the part in the book is being left out where you're saying, okay, I'm talking for Eric now. You're just skipping over that part, and it's just a voice cue for Eric.
Well, she doesn't really say, I'm talking for Eric now. She'll say he's laughing, or he's cracking up.
I see. So how are you perceiving him? I mean, is it a symbolic language, or you're actually hearing him and you're just repeating what he's saying verbatim, or how does that work?
Yeah, for me, the way that I perceive him is with clairvoyancy and clairaudiency. And I have the ability to see the subtle energy that Elisa was talking about before, and I have the ability to hear it. And the way that I hear it is right outside my ear. It doesn't really resonate inside my head. And when you hear it outside your ear, I've trained myself over the last few decades of doing the work. As soon as you hear it, you say it. And so it comes through really fast. I don't have to pause and listen. There's some concepts, that I won't understand, and I'll just say, wait a second, Eric. Walk me through it, hold my hand, repeat it. I don't know that word, sound it out, spell it.
Right,
and we play these games so I can get exactly what he says. And he's really quick to tell me if I've gotten it wrong or I said it a little bit different. He'll snap at me and kind of put me back in line.
So would it simply be like you're listening to a telephone and you're listening and then you're just repeating what he's saying, essentially?
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it.
So I have a question for Eric. I have actually several questions with relation to the book. Can I ask them now? Is this a good time?
Eric's saying, Brian, what's up? He goes, how come we're like 20 minutes into this? Oh, we can cuss, right?
Yeah, let it fly.
Okay. All right. How come we're 20 minutes into this shit and you're just calling on me now?
Well, yeah, no, the book is so interesting, and you guys all are the stars of the book. But Eric, obviously, you're the main attraction. When I was thinking about all the different questions I could ask, because there's some of the questions where I would read in the book where he would say one thing and then he would say something else, and I don't think he was contradicting himself, but I just wanted to get some clarification. And this isn't the most profound question I want to ask, but I'm thinking about our audience, and I just wanted to verify they're books in the afterlife, right? I mean, we can still read, because that sounds sad if I have to finish my entire library here. I wonder if there's
He says, dude, what's even better than that? I'll one-up you. Not only will you have the books from this lifetime that you're crammed into, you will also have access to all the other books of all the other lifetimes, all through history and all through future that you can access. He goes, how excited are you to die right now?
Well, I still have all the books I like to read on this side of the veil, but that's funny. But would reading be the same process as the way turning? Because he describes communication. Okay, so
yeah, he's butting in. He's like, no, Brian. He goes, really, you have to remember that we're not resonating in that three-dimensional lifestyle. We're not as dense as that. We don't need the book. We don't need the page. We don't need to lick our fingers to turn it. It's more of like a downloading process. If you want to access that information, you just get close to it, you remain open, and then you gain that knowledge. You don't carry that buttload. Sorry. I didn't expect that. You don't carry that buttload of information around with you all the time, so it's not like you're overwhelmed and you can't recall one author from the other. It's as soon as you want to focus on that story, that knowledge, it's like your body gets really calm and your head just kind of opens up like a cavern, and there's the info. There's the stuff.
Part of the act of reading, of course, especially if you're reading novels, is the tension that ensues from the linearness of the process of turning the pages and not wanting to know what happens but not knowing. If you want to have that experience, is that possible, or are you pretty much confined to kind of absorbing books like a sponge?
He says, oh, baby boy, like he's going to pet your head or something. He goes, I totally understand that you want to hang on to the concept of being linear and having suspense and mystery and surprise. Because you'll surprise yourself that when you leave that body behind and you gain a higher vibration, a different dimensional plane, that you're not attracted to that kind of need anymore. Because your environment and your body is structured so differently, we don't rely on what's about to happen next. This linear viewpoint is no longer attractive.
The image I'm getting is kind of like getting out of school and having to, graduating and say, okay, done with the books. Now it's time to party, kind of. Is that fair?
He said, I definitely like the party metaphor there. And he said, yeah, that's fair. He goes, but I also want you to be aware that it's not a really human lifestyle. I know that's all we know when we're on Earth is that we set these goals and we achieve these goals. We go from point A to B to C and keep going and achieve and climb the corporate ladder and increase our enlightenment and all that. But here that drive doesn't exist. We have other dimensional planes, we have other worlds, we have other spaces that we go to. It's very hard to describe where I am when I'm talking to the human race because You're looking at it through your human eyes. So a lot of the concepts that I really want to talk about, my mom's asking these questions and I just kind of laugh because I got to use those damn human words. And that shit sucks so much because the words don't describe the meanings that I want to give you. So I got to tell her, all right, I'm going to use the damn words over here about linear, blah, 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 but it's not really linear. So I can understand there are some points in the book that kind of contradict themselves. It's because I'm stuck to the human language.
Sure. So there's several times when Eric mentions having, like, being able to eat pizza and watch TV and kind of being able, if he wanted to have that experience, to do that. But there are other places where he says he doesn't need to eat anymore, and it's not a physical type environment. Can you talk a little bit about those two discrepancies?
Yep. He's being really funny. He's got his fingers up in his hair. He doesn't have a hat on today, and his hair's a little messy. And he said, well, the questions that were being presented was describe what I do. What am I up to every day? And, when I first passed on, you still think like a human. You're kind of weaning off of that. It's not like you pull a little popper and all the strings pop out and like, bam, you're done, you're dead, you got this new viewpoint, yay. He said it's more like when the tub is really full of water and you unplug it, the water doesn't just evaporate right away. You got to like sit around and wait for it to drain and then wash the soap out. It's like, it takes time. So in that moment of adjustment, I still wanted to have some of those things that brought me comfort. So I'd eat some pizza, I'd watch some TV, I'd hang out with my family. He goes, I still do that actually. When you ask me, do I need to do those things? The answer is no. I don't have to feed myself nutrition. I'm an energetic body.
Right, of course. But if you want to have those experiences, you can have those experiences.
Yeah, just like when you get here, you can lower your vibration and sit down with a book and lick your finger and turn the page if you want.
Right. So he actually mentions having a home in the afterlife, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about that.
He says it's so fucking cool. It's the best recycling program you could ever think of. Too bad we can't have it on Earth. But it's all about manifestation. If I want my space, I can create it in my head. And it's real for me. It is for me. But if I'm no longer in it and don't want to be there, it no longer exists.
So was it the same? Like, so if you have, let's say you have a home that you really love and enjoy, and so you recreate it, say, in the afterlife. And then you hang out there and you leave. Can you come back and have it exactly the same? Or do you have to work to recreate it again?
No. You can come back to it. And remember, when I say back to it, it's not like I'm traveling from this city to the next city to get to my house. It is a thought process and you arrive.
It's like thought creates reality.
Right.
Bingo.
Yeah, but here we have the same thing, but it takes a lot longer to manifest what we want. But there, they think about Venice, boom, they're there.
Right. So let's talk about that. In the book, you go into the nature of time and space here in the physical plane versus the afterlife. And I get the impression that before we come into life on the physical plane, that we make all kinds of agreements and plans for the lessons we want to learn while we're here. But it's also my understanding that while we're here, we have the ability, like you say, to create our own reality through our thoughts, our beliefs, and the kind of the law of attraction kind of thing. So my question is, how much of life on the physical plane is destiny, is set to happen, and how much of it is directed here in body by how we think and believe and attract?
He said, you're right. Before you come to the earth, we'll say the earth like it's the only one, but we can talk about that later. You talk about your shit to the T again and again and again. What do you want to learn? What do you want to attract to you? What are you going to pull together? What kind of family are you looking for? You manifest that before you enter into this dense, cute little body that you have. And then once you get here, it's like your cells, the energy that feeds the cells to be dense are kind of halfway programmed with all this stuff that you talked about before you came in. But it is 100% driven, Brian, by free will, by your perspective, by your belief. So you can really screw yourself if you want to. You can totally walk off into some dark path that you never even dreamed of experiencing, or you can stick right to everything that you wanted to manifest for yourself.
So what if you said, okay, I want to learn this specific lesson, and so you set this maybe a challenging growth period for yourself in in your life. And then you decide as time goes on, you think, well, as you're here in body, I don't think I want to do that anymore. And can you
get out?
Change your mind? Yeah, exactly. Or is that set to happen, especially if those plans are made with, other people?
He said, holy shit, if you want to get out, get out.
So is it completely a blank slate once we're here? Is it all about, talk a little bit about manifesting and the law of attraction? And Lisa was talking about how, you're saying there we can create almost instantaneously, and here it takes longer because of the denseness of the physical plane. Talk a little bit about manifesting and how that works.
Yeah. Because when we get here, we don't have that blank slate. Like I said before, we are partly programmed with what we hand created before we came in. Like, we're going to carry that with us. Nobody told us to create that. Karma didn't gauge that we create that. There's no karma. That big God thing that everybody likes to talk about, this kind of belief system, that prime source energy, love, blah, 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 whatever you want to name it. It doesn't judge. It's not saying you got to be one way or another way. We are truly independent with that, of what we want to learn of ourselves. I wish there was some equation that I can lay out for you and go, well, Brian, 25% of this is free will and 30% is destiny and the rest is, he goes, but it doesn't really work that way, because we're such unique energetic beings that we're not based in one, repetitious equation. So you got to look at everybody as being an individual, even though energetically we're connected like some big-ass blanket, where everybody's a little piece of thread. We're all the same thing, but we steer ourselves in what we want to experience. Now, probably the thing that knocks your head around a little bit is, if we have free will, but we've signed up on this agreement with so-and-so, Mary Jane, then how am I affecting Mary? And how is Mary affecting me? Well, you have free will. The lesson that you come to really learn on life is emotions. And all emotions are based in love. People want this clarity, this tell me how to live my life and what's the meaning of life. And he said, I'll stand up and just simply say it's about experiencing love and experiencing emotions. It's not about winning the most money.
So let's say that, so you come down and there are things, there are experiences you want to have, right? So there are places you want to travel, or there are, like you said, there's a job you want to really have. And by job, I don't necessarily mean something where you would go to and it's just in order to make money to survive, but rather it's what you feel is your calling. And for a lot of our listeners, it's writing, it's making books, and I'm kind of channeling myself, and I'm channeling our audience and saying, okay, I want to have the experience of being an author and being able to write books for a living. If that was not set down, say, in our destiny, can I still make that happen? And if so, how? How can you help?
Oh, yeah. You can totally make it happen. If you're using your free will and in the core of your body that you want to have your voice heard. Really, that's what writers are. They're like absentee teachers. They're storytellers. We need them in every culture. We need them in our society, and I don't think that we have enough. And I just have to shout out about how I'm so proud of my mom for using pen to paper, fingers to keys to allow her experience to come through, to encourage others to speak up. I mean, it's kind of what we're missing, right? Especially in America, I think we're separating ourselves. He just kind of cocked his eyes at me and he goes, I'm getting off topic, aren't I? I was like, I don't know, I guess. Because, but we're missing that connection of storytelling people to people. So if you've got that embodied inside of you, all you need is the emotional support from yourself, the emotional honesty that this is who you want to create yourself to be, and success is yours, however you define success. I think we really screw ourselves. We get trapped in the human language and we get trapped inside of our society that says you got to be right or wrong. You can't just be. And this is the whole crack your brain open, follow your heart movement that's happening with this enlightenment stuff, is follow your heart. Don't define yourself. Just be.
So we have a lot of people who listen to these interviews and who read our magazine who love to write. And for them, that's following their bliss and following their heart. And yet a lot of people struggle with essentially wanting an audience, being able to share their heart and to write these wonderful books, these wonderful stories. Yet it can be challenging at times when you're sending out query letters to agents and they're giving you rejections. And if a soul that's here really wants to have that experience of success in this area, let's define it in not necessarily making money or status, but just having an audience and being able to share their creations with other people, and they want to manifest that. Can you give advice on what's the best way to make that happen?
Yeah, he said absolutely. Define success however you want, just like you said. But to achieve it, you have to be consciously aware of how you're working it, right? So if you have a want, whether it's the more money, the bigger audience, the better publishing, a different agent, if you have this want that you see that you can create to better yourself in it, you've got to look at, is your head on the right page? Is your heart on the right page? Are you taking the physical actions to be on the right page? And is your belief system on the right page? Like my mom and I talk all the time. There's 4 bodies trapped inside that human piece of luggage you have, and you got to get all 4 of those roommates, head, heart, body, soul, on the same page for you to be able to create this magic, this success that we're talking about right now. Because a lot of people are sabotaging themselves, but they have no fucking idea why. Because their heart is in it, but their head is like, I don't know, you kind of suck at that. I think you're cursed. I think it's not going right for you. And he says, who wants a head that talks like that? You got to really address it. Work on your tool. These 4 roommates are your tools, and get them to line up in the way that you define your success or what you believe you want or need, and follow through. And the one thing, I don't care what we're talking about, if you're working at something really, 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 really hard and it's not turning out, then look at how you're approaching it. Turn 1 degree to the right, 1 degree to the left, and keep turning until you can get what you feel is best for you. But also, I freaking love this story, and I use it a lot. Sorry, he just started talking really fast. Okay, he uses this frequently. I've heard this as well, but he's saying if somebody calls you a horse, you can smile and laugh at it. If a second person calls you a horse, you might want to think about it. If a third person calls you a horse, you might want to go out and buy a fucking saddle. So you got to pay attention to what your environment says about how you're behaving. Because maybe visually, visionary, you've missed your mark slightly. Maybe you are the horse, but you were trying to be a donkey. So change your tactic. Turn 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree until you can nail what you want.
So do you have any advice on how to get in alignment in a, is it meditation? Is it soul searching? Can you?
He's laughing. Oh, Brian.
I'm looking for a shortcut here, Eric. Help me out.
Yeah, I'd love to give you a shortcut and the key to heaven, but it doesn't really work like that. For some people, meditation kicks ass. It really is incredible. For most people, they can't sit still and meditate. And plus, they have the wrong definition of meditation to begin with. Clarity, emotional honesty is, if I've got to give you a shortcut, Brian, I would say emotional honesty is it. For yourself, know exactly how you feel about what you're doing. And if you feel like you're sacrificing yourself, taking a hit, not being true to who you are, then you're fucking yourself over. And you've got to back up. Oh, he's making the boo, 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 the backup sound. Oh, gosh. Back on track, Eric. Come on. You got to back up and look at, why did you sacrifice yourself? Why did you tell the white lie? Why weren't you 100% honest? And then address that boundary, address that weakness, why you felt you had to fold something over so nobody could see it. And then once you get right with yourself with emotional honesty, then to whomever you're communicating, make sure that they get it. And just go, hey, I don't think you're understanding. Can I show you in a different way? And come at it at this angle. And once you have that, I think the meditation, the Tai Chi, the whole getting Zen, setting goals, being linear, all that will kind of fall into place because you're right with yourself.
Wow, that's great. So Eric, you and your mom have created this, and Jamie, of course, have created this awesome book, and that I would highly recommend all our listeners pick up. I was wondering, it seems like it has a potential to help a lot of people, and I don't know, it just strikes me that there's some sense of destiny that like it was meant to be. Can you talk about that a little bit? And of course, Lisa, if you wanted to jump in anytime.
He was like, Mom, hit it, because we know this is a destiny thing.
Well, yes, I think this book is a little different than a lot of the similar books because of Eric and, of course, Jamie, I'm kind of just a secretary, and Eric's different. It's not like channeling the ascended masters who start out with, welcome, my dear one. He's just like raw in your face, casual, and I don't know, it just makes him more approachable. He doesn't want to just preach to the choir and reach out to those who already knowledgeable about spiritual matters. He wants to reach the hard hat and the single mother and the businessman and the high school student, etc. And I think just the way he is, he's able to do that and cross these boundaries and reach a bigger mass of people.
Right. But would you say that this was part of, say, your life plan, Elisa, to write this book? And if so, would that mean that Eric's passing wasn't necessarily an accident, or that was somehow going to happen?
Well, and this approaches or answers part of your destiny type and spiritual contract type questions. It was in his contract to kill himself. So he needed to come down here and suffer mercilessly, and then that way learn to be compassionate, become a good listener, become a better teacher, and then he was to take his life, etc. But free will intervened in that he was supposed to take his life in the mid to late 20s so that we wouldn't find him. He'd be in an apartment somewhere. So he did change that contract a little bit. It doesn't feel like it's my destiny. I guess Eric can answer that, but it feels like I'm just leading from behind, shall we say.
If I can interject.
Oh, please.
I loved how Elisa said that in the book she was the secretary, because I just feel like the translator, and Eric has all the information. But doing this work for over 20 years, what makes this feel like such a destiny moment, a book that was meant to happen for the masses, is when you look at Elisa and her experience, her background is to research, to study. She was a diagnostics physician, correct? You were able, as an internist, to research and get to the nitty-gritty. And we have this beautiful woman who went through a tragic experience, but her head was so motivated to research and ask the details. And she ended up with a son who saw his mother's drive, compassion to get to the bottom of things. And he's a loudmouth in the greatest way I could ever say that, a loudmouth. And putting the two of them together, it is total magic on my end to just be able to sit in the room and hear them banter back and forth. The questions that Elisa asks are so brilliant. And the way that Eric responds with these metaphors that anyone can understand, a beginner and someone who's been enlightened for decades can pick up the book and just go, wow, that's a great way to say that. Looking at their contracts with each other, I would say, absolutely. Eric's found his calling and is helping his mother, and his mother is helping the world address what grief is. And not to be afraid to talk about suicide and the end of life. The end of life doesn't have to be this fearful, devastating experience.
There's a lot of material here that Eric covers. How did you decide what was going to be in the book and what wasn't?
Well, a lot of it just popped into my mind, but many of the questions came from the blog members, actually. And then those questions branched off into questions of my own. So the questions sort of grew organically.
And was there anything that isn't in the book that you wish had been there, or vice versa?
Oh, gosh, there is so much that could have gone into the book, but it'd have to be in volumes. A lot more could have been about the human experience, but this particular book deals more with what's death like, what's the afterlife like, what it is like to not have a body, what is God, who are we, why are we here, what's the nature of consciousness, matter, reality, time. So I suppose they're more heady and outside of the human experience. The next book, if I write one, will be what it's like to be human and how you survive and get the most of the human experience.
Right. And what kind of practical advice from the other side about how to be here?
Yes. What do you do when you feel stuck? What do you say to people who struggle and grieve? What is the spiritual basis for certain diseases like cancer, etc., and how can you approach that? So it'll have to do with all things human.
Jamie, you described seeing Eric physically and seeing him with a hat or without a hat. Eric, so it sounds like you don't have a body, but if you want to feel what it's like to have a body, you certainly can do that. Is that safe to say?
He said, correct. It's not really feeling it the way I think that you might describe it, like hand to hand or hand to wall where it resists. But we can see ourselves and adjust it and make ourselves appear to look the way that we want. He's messing with me.
Okay. So he talks in the book about having past lives, and some of the things he was experiencing in this lifetime had to do with past lives. So you have a lifetime, and then you pass, and you go back to before, and you remember that information. So then, as you're operating in the hereafter, does he define himself as Eric, or is he a whole of those experiences, or what does he feel he is?
He said, right now, I identify myself as Eric. My characteristics from when I just left Eric's life. But I do have the knowledge of all the other lives that I am living. Because remember, Brian, time, not linear. No.
Right, so it's all happening simultaneously. So you could say a past life, future life, it's all happening from your perspective
now.
Now, right, of course. But so you withdraw from that, and so you can make. But if he wanted to have different colored hair, or be taller or whatever,
change my shirt, grow some muscles. I always need a few of those.
But it seems like it would be the most comfortable to be with the experience you just had.
Well, he said it's not just that, but let's say if I want to get my friend's attention on Earth, I don't want to show up with my light body. She's not going to look at me and go, hey, look at that light. That's Eric. Because visually, she's not going to recognize it. So we in spirit tend to show up how you'd best remember us, so that when you look at us, you freak out and you go, oh my God, that's so-and-so. And we say, hi, how are you?
Let's say you transitioned over, you were still identified with having a physical experience. If you wanted to what degree could you replicate that in the afterlife?
He goes, we can, but I have to tell you, there's a slight difference. It'll never be 100% exactly like it is when you're in your body. And that's why it's so special to be in your body. Like, touch blows my mind. When you're human, like, you go for something and you can just grab it, you can feel it, you can move it, you can hug, you can embrace. There's that surface touch that makes it very dense and real. But here, energetically, when we go to grab or embrace or hold close, it's like we merge. And we get to have that experience, but it doesn't come with that resistance like it does in the third dimensional plane.
Right, but so like when he was talking about eating pizza and watching TV because that was comfortable for him, is that experience pretty much indistinguishable from when he had it, in life, or is that just a flimsy, energetic representation of what life is like on this plane?
Flimsy. He was like, I kind of like that word. He was, let's just say you can do it about 80%.
Okay.
80% spot on, which is totally enjoyable. That's a B. It's great.
Right.
But you just can't get it so accurate like you're on Earth. I mean, being alive on Earth is so unique. It is so special. It's really to be cherished. I know it sucks and it's hard a lot of times, but you got such a sweet spot right there. You'll know more about it when you die, but isn't that the kicker? Retrospect, you're always smarter, right, Mom?
Oh, yeah, 2020.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your joining me. Eric, thank you very much for spending your, I'm using air quotes here, time with us, and good luck with the book. This has been Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. Today I've been speaking with Dr. Lisa Medhus, her son Eric, and spiritual communicator Jamie Butler.